Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Welcome, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, to another installment of Positive Recovery MD with Julie DeNova, myself, Jason Powers. We have a fantastic guest, a world-renowned hepatologist by the name of Joe Galati. I'm going to let Julie introduce him today.
So a little bit about Dr. Galati is he's a native of Long Island, New York. Dr. Joe Galati was raised in a family where good nutrition and family were ways of life. Today, his practice, Liver Specialist of Texas and the Metabolic Liver Center, Fatty Liver Disease Clinic, is devoted to the care of patients with all facets of liver diseases, obesity, fatty liver, and related disorders. He received his undergraduate degree at Syracuse University and attended St. George's University School of Medicine. Following medical school, Dr. Galati was an intern and resident in internal medicine at State University of New York Health Systems in the center in Brooklyn, formerly Downstate Medical Center, Kings County Hospital Center, one of the premier teaching hospitals in the country. He remained an additional year in the department to assume responsibilities as the chief medical resident in the Department of Medicine. Traveled to Omaha, Nebraska to perform his gastroenterology and hepatology transplant fellowships at University of Nebraska. Dr. Galati and his family came to Houston, Texas. We're very lucky, and the Texas Medical Center in 1994. He is a national and international speaker and the founder of Your Health First Education, which is a 501c3 organization whose mission is to provide education and support to the public, raising awareness about liver disease, obesity, alcohol abuse, nutrition, disease screening, and early intervention. Since 2003, Dr. Galati has created consumer-oriented radio programming on health and wellness, producing and hosting Your Health First, a 1-hour radio program each weekend, heard on iHeartRadio's 740 AM KTRH. When he's not practicing medicine, Dr. Galati is an avid photographer and is a board member of Entrepreneurs Organization, supporting entrepreneurs in all corners of the world. We're super lucky to have Dr. Galati on our show today, and so thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, it's great. Always a pleasure to work with all of you.
Yeah, so before we get into Dr. Galati's story, let me tell you a brief story about my home group in AA. When I got sober, early on, I'm on fire. I've got a sponsor. I'm going to meetings daily, and there's a guy that shows up who is like yellow and bloated, and he's really trying to get this deal. Obviously, an alcoholic with cirrhosis or liver failure. And, he'll disappear for a couple of weeks, come back, disappear, come back. And when he shares, completely transparent, he had bleeding in his esophagus, the upper part of sort of his, intestinal system. And he needed the bleeding to get cauterized, to be stopped. And the thing is, like, he was really trying to get sober, but he was on a 6-month waiting list for the liver. And he would share in tears, I really, I know I got here. This wasn't like an overnight process. I take full responsibility, but I'm afraid I'm going to die before I get a liver. And the guy was earnest. He was engaged, and yeah, he actually, it was really sad. And it was one of those just moments that the entire group of us sort of remember this guy. And it's like he died sober. But fast forward to today, Dr. Galati is a trailblazer and just courageous physician that in the face of this arbitrary 6-month waiting period, he, along with some of his colleagues in Houston, the Methodist liver transplant team, were saying that 6 months is somewhat arbitrary. Let's go ahead and help these alcoholics. And you know what? Just amazing amazing guy, amazing doctor. He's got a radio program. It's awesome. And, for a lot of you guys in recovery, I just don't know how exciting listening to his hepatology experience will be. But I do want you to hear something I was treated to a couple years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, when I heard him tell his story at an EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization event. Because I don't want to ruin it or tell you, but like, Joe, thank you so much for being on, and thanks for telling the story, because there's nothing like it. I mean, how many people have done what you've done? So let's hear it.
Well, I could honestly say, without stretching the truth, that I wanted to be a physician as long as I could remember. And second grade, I had been sick as a kid. I had some strange blood problem, and my pediatrician told my parents I had to stay home almost the entire school year. And so my mother homeschooled me almost the entire second grade, and I was absolutely fearful of being held back. And that was even at second grade. I did not want to be held back. So my mother worked with me, the school worked with me, and I did get through second grade. But I spent a lot of time at home, sort of by myself with my parents. My other siblings were at school. Now, the key here is my father, his entire career was in pharmaceutical sales. And I had access to all sorts of medical material. There were medical journals around the house, very sort of primitive movies that he would show physicians on different procedures and things like that. And when I wasn't, doing my second grade schoolwork, I wasn't allowed to go outside. I was sitting in our basement looking at these magazines. And so I said, this is cool. This is what I want to do. So from an early on, I was single-mindedly determined to become a doctor. So went through high school, went through college. I was going to be, I was pre-med, and I was just going to, sort of roll into medical school. But for lots of different reasons, I did not get admitted to any of the U.S. medical schools that I applied to. I retook the entrance exam a second time. I took it a third time. I took it a crazy fourth time over nearly 3 years. I graduated from college. I worked in New York City trying to get into medical school. The only option I came up with that worked was I went to medical school on the tiny island of Grenada, the southernmost island in the Caribbean, in 1983. And I said, okay, this is my pathway to medical school. Hell or high water, Grenada or bust, I'm going to go to medical school there. And I must say, Jason, this was with a lot of antagonism from my college at Syracuse University. You don't know what you're doing. It's a disaster. You'll never turn out to be anything. But it was this determination, and basically, screw you. I was going to do this. So a week before I go to Grenada in the spring of 83, President Reagan has a national address to the nation where he basically shows these aerial photography pictures of Grenada and the Cubans that were there building an airport. And he was not going to tolerate having a Cuban-like communist nation in our hemisphere. Cuba was bad enough. He did not want, Grenada. And he basically put them on warning. And I'm like, holy smokes, this is where I am going in a week. So I get to Grenada in March of 83, and the place is a hotbed of political, radical activism. I'm like, okay, I'm here to go to medical school. So the entire from March to October, there is stuff going on there that you just can't believe. There was yet another coup on top of this. The even more hard leftist guerrillas killed everybody in the cabinet. They take over a 24-hour shoot on site curfew for 6 days. And I'm sitting there saying, I just want to go to medical school. I don't want to get thrown into this whole, political thing. A couple of days later after this, the United States invades Grenada. to restore democracy and to rescue the medical students. And they didn't want another Iran hostage situation. Reagan, the new sheriff, was in town, and he was not going to take any of this crap. And so the place is under siege. The Army Rangers invade, the Marines shooting up everything within 100 yards of me, which, by the way, I've got this all on cassette tape. It's great listening. We get helicoptered out. The first time the Black Hawk helicopters were deployed, fly out to an aircraft carrier, get debriefed by military intelligence. I get flown back a mile back to shore, and then I fly on a C-141 to Charleston, to a military base there, and I am free to go home. And I'm like, if you want to talk about shell shock, that was it. So anyway, I get to Roosevelt Roads Naval Air Station in Puerto Rico to change planes, to change C-141s, sort of like Southwest, you change planes. And I'm sitting there, literally, I'm 24 years old, a little bit of shell shock. And the Navy said they've set up phones. You could call anywhere in the world, just pick up the phone and dial. So I call my parents, tell them I'm alive. And we had about 3 or 4 hours. So I call Western Union. For those that are a little young, Western Union was like the only way to send a message to anybody. And I pick it up. I said, Western Union. And they connect me. And I said, I want to send a telegram to the president. So I'm like, they didn't say anything. And I dictate a message to President Reagan, thanking him for getting my butt out of there and really restoring democracy, because I did make it a point to get to know the people of Grenada. And they really were truly suffering politically and religiously. And I felt like I wanted to say something. And I met all these wonderful service members, and I wanted to send a message. Hang up, go home. 4 days later, I am at dinner with some friends of mine, and somebody from the wait staff comes over, and they said, "Is there a Joe here?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, your mother's on the phone, right? Again, pre-cell phone, pre-beeper, And I'm like, all right, Mom, what's wrong? She said, "We just got a call from the White House. The president got your telegram, and he wants you for breakfast on Monday morning." I'm like, come on, it's a joke. And she's like, "No, the guy said he'll be there till 10 o'clock at night." So I said, "All right, we're just finishing dessert. I'll be home." So sure enough, I race home. There's a number that my parents wrote down, and I call up, and this guy identifies himself. He's like, White House. And I'm like, this really is the White House. And he's like, "Yeah, the president got your telegram, and he's been getting a lot of letters, and he wants a few of the medical students to come to breakfast, meet with him, meet with the cabinet, meet with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and et cetera, et cetera. Can you come on Monday morning at 8? I'm like, hell yeah, I'll be there. So anyway, I drive down to Washington and, meet the president, have breakfast at the White House. And it was just unbelievable for that to happen. And obviously went back to Grenada a few months later, finished medical school. But I think the lesson here, if that's what you're looking for, I think if you want something bad enough, be it your health, recovery, a better relationship,
the best thing to do is send a telegraph to the president, right?
Yes, and he will get you and support you. But I think it all worked out despite having things blown up around you, being told you'll never amount to anything, and to believe in yourself. That is, it's such a sort of a cliche, but it really is true, and it served me very well. So it really was amazing.
And I bet that's probably what underlies your courage and sort of trailblazing in wanting to help people that are basically written off, that are marginalized. The work that we do is hard, Jason. You're not dealing with a simple 9-to-5 kind of medical practice and entity. This stuff is hard. To be successful, you have to be, a combination of thick-skinned to, go against the tide,
and to be committed to what you're doing, your customers, your patients, their families, and just not take no for an answer and just keep driving on.
I know, especially since as doctors, we like really neat things that there's an etiology, we remove it or we address it and then it's gone. And, people want outcomes that are just linear and bada boo, bada bing, but it's just not that way. I mean, it's so complex. People, human beings, the best we'll ever be is imperfect.
Yeah. I think for some specialties, you've got a growth on your shoulder, cut it out. You have a bad tooth, yank it out. You've got a bad brain chemistry. It's you can't just cut it out and swap it out. The challenge, which you mentioned earlier, is for me, we're dealing with the addiction and the emotional component of it and the physical medical part, which is a lot more complicated. There are medicines, there are pills, there are therapies to fix the physical part, but the emotional part is somewhere out there in the ether. It's very difficult to scan it. You can't scan your emotion. Right.
And what you were saying made me think of something else that you can't sort of measure. But I understand every year the successful transplants at Methodist, they gather once a year for a meeting that is like the most special thing in the world, right? Talk about that a little bit, the success of what you do.
Yeah, well, what we do is typically we have, I believe we call it a patient celebration or celebration of life. And it is a time for all of the patients and their family and caretakers to come together, the medical team, the nurses, the doctors, the pharmacists, the social workers, everybody gets together and we hug and reminisce about their own journey. But also the other people that show up are those that may have been on the transplant waiting list, but lost a loved one. The other is donor families will come. So people that, lost a loved one, and 90% of the time it's never under a good circumstance. And the donor family is there and maybe line up with the recipient and you see that circle of life. And it's very emotional. I mean, the most hardened individual will strike up a tear. It's pretty emotional, but it gives us all a bit of closure to see the long road that they've had. The end result is they're there with their family and their grandchildren and their own children, and it makes for a very rewarding moment, and it rejuices everybody to get out there and keep fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Julie, you can attest to this, that what we do is imperfect. And yeah, people relapse with chronic diseases, but when somebody gets it and they come back year after year and just that light behind their eyes, it really is so rewarding. It's like nothing else. It is amazing. Yeah.
It is. And what I would say, one of the things, Dr. Galati, that I've always kind of admired about you is just your passion and the advocacy that you do for those who do suffer from substance use disorder, particularly alcoholics, and taking the risk and taking a look at them as a whole person. And I remember one time, and I hope that you can share this, hope you remember it because I do. We were having a conversation and you were comparing, the alcoholic liver to a fatty liver from somebody who just wasn't eating right. And they both wind up needing a transplant. How do we know who's going to do better? Right. And do you remember a little bit about that conversation, and can you share?
You know what? I'm going to have you fill it in because I give me a hint.
Really, we can't predict who's absolutely going to do better, but sometimes the alcoholic liver can actually wind up doing better if they remain abstinent. The person who goes back to eating McDonald's food, which is a lot, it's just hard, right?
Well, one shocking point, which to this day, with all the education we think we work on, but somehow it's like trying to get through a cinder block sometimes. The survival of patients with alcohol-related liver disease has always been at the highest level compared to all the other diseases that people come with. Hepatitis C, hepatitis B, fatty liver, like you said, Julie, and a whole host of genetic diseases. Dr. Powers knows that we have gotten ethicists involved to say, is it ethical to do a liver transplant on an alcoholic? By the way, they did it to themselves. And that is sort of a bogus approach to this. And the ethicist very easily said, it is the outcome that we look for. It is the survival in transplant. And if the survival is no different than any other disease, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, fatty liver, there is no ethical dilemma here. And so that was basically the green light for us to forge ahead with this somewhat aggressive alcoholic or alcohol use disorder and liver disease and transplant. Now, the thing that everybody will still say, they did it to themselves. So you do not deserve a chance. You do not deserve at least to be listened to. But what I say every time, how many millions of open heart surgeries are done every year? Okay. How many surgical resections of a lung tumor from smoking is done? Nobody, when you're at work and you say, oh, my Uncle Phil had open heart surgery. And everybody will say, oh, I hope he's okay, and send him my wishes. Nobody is outraged to say they operated on that guy, the guy that had uncontrolled diabetes for 25 years and weighs 300 pounds and hasn't walked in 20 years. That's horrible. He did it to himself. Nobody. Or the smoker with lung cancer going for chemotherapy that cost $1 billion. Nobody's saying, smoker. Forget it. Why take care of this guy? And it goes on and on. So, but the alcoholic, God forbid, they're held to a different standard. And part of it is, I would say, a stigma with alcoholism, but there isn't a stigma with having high cholesterol or not exercising. So that, to me, is the challenge that day after day, all of us with you in tow is the challenge.
Well said. Well said. And thank you for doing what you're doing. So if we're going to move on to the next portion of the podcast where I ask you questions and you just tell me what comes to mind. So let me ask you, what is your favorite sound?
I would say the sound of my family.
Awesome. And what's your least favorite sound?
My alarm clock.
All right. And let's say that you, from a young person, you could have chosen a different vocation and done it your whole life. I know you wanted to be a doctor your whole life, but what other vocation would you have loved to have a go at?
I would have been a photojournalist.
That's right. Yeah.
And, besides the medicine at second grade, my uncle, my mother's youngest brother, was a professional photographer in New York City. We would hang around with him and he would take us on photo shoots of celebrities in New York. And, at your birthday, Christmas party, 4th of July party, everybody had their Polaroid or Instamatic camera. My Uncle Larry was there with his speed graphic professional press camera. The next morning, we would have 8x10 black and white glossies on our kitchen table. So I'm like, this is cool. And so, I would have been a photojournalist.
I could see that. You take good pictures. What vocation would you loathe doing?
Loathe? Oh, man. What would I hate to do? I would say probably anything that would be part of a big corporate company. I would not want to work for General Motors.
Right.
Or Ford or IBM or something like that.
All right. What turns you on?
Well, I would say two things: food and family.
In Italian.
It would be, I think I get, besides all the medical stuff that I just love, it is having people over the house cooking and yucking it up and having fun, sharing stories and togetherness. That's the best thing. And it could be with good friends too, Jason. So don't count yourself out.
I won't.
And Julie.
What turns you off?
I would say, well, let me back it up. I will use the word in the title of a book. A great book to read is The No Asshole Rule. So, assholes.
Okay, fair enough. Assuming there's a God, when you die, what would you like to hear come out of God's mouth?
You did a good job.
Well said. All right, I'll hand it over to you, Jules.
Well, I have one more question. It's in the same vein. So where did you enjoy spending more time, on the 2-hour hanging out with Willie Nelson on the bus or at the White House?
I would say with Willie Nelson, but the White House was, a kid from Long Island. We were middle class. Both my parents worked. We were okay, but nothing too fancy. But to be at the White House, I mean, in the White House, in the lawn of the White House, in the presence of the president, like right there, the cabinet. And, it's funny, the silverware or the china we were eating off of was a gift of, one of the other presidents from, the 1800s. And it's like, this is the real crap you're eating off of, But sitting with Willie Nelson, when I was photographing him, I'm working on a book, The Great Hands of Texas. And so I take hand portraits. Sitting with Willie, and it was raw. It was him. It was his current wife, his ex-wife, and the ex-wife's husband. And we're sitting there, and Willie is playing cassette tapes of demos, and he's asking for us for advice on what he thought he should do with the music. And it was 2 hours sitting there, and I'm just saying to myself, this can't be real. This absolutely can't be real. So I think it was the rawness, the unscripted of it. His hair was down. He was in his space. I was there as a guest. Unbelievable.
That sounds so cool.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with me. I'm glad that I got to ask that question. We're going to roll right into the positive intervention. And I really think this one couldn't have been more perfect for you and kind of what you've been up to. Today is a quote by Thomas Jefferson: "Leave all the afternoon for exercise and recreation, which are as necessary as reading. I will rather say more necessary, because health is worth more than learning." While it might not be feasible to take the entire afternoon off, it is possible to find time to get moving before or after work, or even during your lunch break. Which is more convenient, exercising for a brief period of time every day, or being dead for every minute of every day? Exercise is worth the effort. It enhances physical health, makes the mind sharp, and boosts feel-good neurotransmitters. Exercising in the middle of the day can actually make you more productive at work than skipping lunch and working nonstop for hours. Try it. Wellness is one of those blessings money cannot buy, and maximizing your health should not wait for tomorrow. So our positive intervention that we asked Dr. Galati to participate in was: get your blood flowing by exercising rigorously for at least 20 minutes. Of course, after consulting with your doctor, or in this case, consulting with yourself.
Yes.
If you've already have a consistent exercise habit, go ahead and challenge your body and broaden your mind by trying something new today. If you're a runner, go for a bike ride or a swim. If you're a yogi, try lifting weights, low weight, high repetition. And if you're a gym buff, do your exercise today outside. So how did that go for you, and what type of exercise maybe did you participate in?
Well, so far today, what I did was simply, I read a great book, part of EO. It's called Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've seen it, but, the idea is to create good habits and get rid of bad habits. And one of the strategies they use is to link a positive habit with something you're doing already. And so I shower most days of the week. So what I said was, right before I shower, I get down and I do 100 crunches and 50 push-ups every day. And so it has become so ingrained over the last, basically I've only been doing it about two full months, that if I don't do it, like I go to the shower in the morning and I turn on the water and I'm like, wait, I have to stop. I'll shut it off and I will do that. The other thing is, last year we bought a Peloton. And so we, all of us as a family, we have some friendly competition amongst ourselves with the Peloton. So probably before dinner tonight, I will hop on the Peloton for 20 to 30 minutes.
Fantastic. So who's winning in your household?
It goes up and down. Sometimes I'm ahead. Sometimes my daughter will surprise me and just, when I don't see what she's doing, she'll pass ahead. But typically she and I are the top dogs.
Awesome. Dr. Powers, I see a punching bag in your background.
Well, no, speaking of dogs, like in my family, it was competition of who could take the most steps. And when we used to have a dog, I would just put mine on the dog and let him go, run around. And then I was killing everybody.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, I did 30 minutes of high intensity interval training on the bag. It's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it totally helps.
Yeah, that gives you a hell of a workout.
Totally. I can't imagine doing it if somebody was also pummeling me in the face and the belly. It's hard enough hitting a bag. Oh,
it is. And I think boxing, you have to have respect for them. I don't totally agree with getting your head whacked for a living, but or even sparring. I mean, just imagine sparring and not getting hit, and you're trying to be on the offense, and yet you're defensive more than 50%.
So a lot of folks talk about, how important exercise is, and of course it is, but a lot of it too is about the food that we're putting into our body. So before we close, Dr. Galati, could you share just the title of your book and where somebody might go to get that? Because it's a great read, and I would love for our listeners to hear about that.
Yeah. So the name of the book is Eating Yourself Sick. And, it's based on a lot of what I've seen both growing up in my New York Italian family and, from my parents, but just observing my patients and so many of the issues that they have, the obesity and diabetes and high blood pressure and kidney disease, it all traces back to what they have been eating or what they're not eating. And so even though people have looked at the title and they said, well, it's sort of a bit of a downer, eating yourself sick. How about eating yourself to wellness? So I said, you know what? I'm going to stick with eating yourself sick because that is the problem. There are, the patients I'm seeing are sick. They're not well. And so we have to look at it that way. The book is available online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And if you walk into my office one day, I'm sure one of my friendly staff will sell you a copy as well.
Are they signed? Because I'll definitely buy
I sign them, yeah.
All right, sweet.
I sign them. So
fantastic. Well, you can have a book trade-off because we'll be making sure if you don't already have the copy of Dr. Powers' Positive Recovery Daily Guide, we can do that.
Absolutely.
Get that over to you. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Galati.
Well,
it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And again, you're a great partner in taking care of our patients, and the job and work you do is very tough, but very rewarding in the end.
Thank you very much, Dr.
All
Galati.
right.
Again, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.